Hello, everybody, and especially hello to my academic colleagues for whom this video is being produced. I'm Greg Sadler. I have a YouTube channel that I've been uploading content in and using for my classes for about the last 9 years. And I know that there's a lot of people who don't have a lot of background with video production and are now in the situation of having to decide, what do I do as I move all of my face-to-face classes to online format? And there is the synchronous things that you can do with Zoom and other video conferencing platforms, and that's great. I'm not saying don't do that. That's wonderful sort of stuff. But you might also want to create asynchronous learning opportunities for your students by shooting videos. And that's what this video is about. It's to try to provide some basic information and tips and things that you want to keep in mind, and also some encouragement for those who might find the task a little daunting. And what's the task? Making videos for your students to substitute for the face-to-face education that isn't taking place. So I'm going to talk about what some of the typical pain points and worries and confusions are. This is a really basic video. I'm not going to go super into depth about a lot of things. You can ask me things in the comments, and perhaps I'll shoot some other videos on specific things down the line. But this is for doing bare bone video production. So that's going to be the core of what we're doing here. Before we get into the nuts and bolts about video production and planning and all those sorts of things that you might be really worried about, let's take a bit of time to address some very basic concerns, just to add a little bit of perhaps confidence or confirmation. The number one question that I think is on most of my colleagues' minds who haven't yet produced videos is this something I can actually do? And the answer is unequivocally yes, that you can produce good lecture videos that will be effective means of education and be helpful for your students. And that's what really counts. It doesn't matter whether they have bells and whistles, if they're high production, so long as they get the content across. That's what's being expected of you. You're not being expected to produce a high quality online class that would pass, say, Quality Matters standards. You are expected in a crisis to move your classes online and provide online instruction. And lecture videos are a very good way of doing that. So nobody is going to be holding you accountable for ums and ahs or the lighting not being right or the sound not being perfect or anything along those lines. It won't be the students, who are going to be very grateful for you doing this. It won't be your fellow instructors. It won't be administrators. So that's one thing you can put aside right away. Another basic worry that you might have is, are students actually going to watch the videos? And the answer is yes. Students do, in fact, really value having good content videos in online education, which is now what all of you are getting sort of a baptism by fire in. So that's another thing. One last thing that I thought I'd point out. Everybody knows that you're working from home. You don't need a fancy studio. I shoot a lot of my videos in front of this chalkboard, so you may have seen some of them, or sitting in front of the Mac that's right next to me. I'm shooting this right now on my laptop. The only thing that's particularly fancy about it is I'm using my nice Blue Yeti microphone, but you don't need that sort of thing. You can record on your phone. You can record in a lot of different ways. And everybody knows that you're working within conditions that are not ideal. Every once in a while here, my cat comes in and out. I don't have kids like that guy with the video to run in and out and be taken out. But if that happens to you, that's A-okay. Nobody is expecting the stuff that you do to be perfect. The first thing that we should talk about is what you're actually going to need for video production. You notice I've changed scene a little bit, and that's what I can do with this laptop. It's kind of nice, you know. There's my chalkboard. There's my editing station with our iMac. I shot a video earlier today for my students. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can shoot video. One thing that you can do is if you've got a cell phone that's relatively new, like from the last 3 years. And the only reason I bring that up is because you want to have enough memory to do it. You can actually record from your cell phone. You can, you know, just turn it on and, you know, start recording with a front-facing camera. You can hold it. It's going to be a little less steady, but that's okay. Nobody expects perfection. You might want to prop it in place, right? Or have some way of holding it. There are tripods that you can get, but you know, if you don't have one already, that may be a little bit of an issue. And so this is probably sort of the bare bottom level of recording. You can also record, as I'm doing right now, from the camera in your laptop. Most of us have laptops or desktop computers that now have cameras front-facing. We use them for Skype and for all sorts of other things. You can use that, and it's going to be decent quality. The recording that you're going to get in terms of sound from your computer, that'll vary a bit, but nobody's, again, expecting perfection. You can get decent quality sound out of a laptop. You get good quality sound out of a phone. Desktops are quite good. Obviously, if you have a mic, it's nice to use one, but it's not absolutely necessary. Then if you want to get more sophisticated, and for right now, I don't actually recommend that you do that, but if you want to get more sophisticated, you can always use an actual camera. This is the GoPro that I use for many of my videos. Prior to that, I was using a flip cam. And you notice that's not a very fancy camera. You don't actually need to use high-end equipment to get good results that will work for your students. So those are some of the considerations. The other things you want to think about, lighting, right? You notice that I've got these desk lamps that I use here. I also, within my studio, here we go, that's my lighting stuff, my gear. And I got those from Amazon. You can get an entire kit for $50, if I remember right. My tripod actually came from Amazon for $25. You don't have to pay a lot to get decent equipment, but you do want to think about lighting. And if you don't have good lighting in your place, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect because you can also fix that in the editing software. Think about natural light. Think about using the windows that you have just to create a situation in which you can produce the videos that you want for your students. What else? The only other thing that I'll mention is that for my recordings, I also like to use a lapel mic because, you know, if I'm in front of the chalkboard, otherwise, you know, the further you are from the recording device, the more it's picking up background sound. So this camera is a kind of a noisy camera, the GoPro, noisier actually than the previous one. So I use this and I record the sound file and then I put it in during the editing process, which is a very easy thing to do. If you're doing any sort of videos that aren't using a camera, but say voice over PowerPoint or anything like that, obviously you're using the mic from your computer, and it will be good enough. You don't need anything super fancy for creating course videos. One of the things that you want to think about is the format of the videos that you're going to use. And you're not stuck with just one format. So it's not as if you start doing voice over PowerPoints that in order to make the class consistent, you have to stick with that and never do anything else. You can do whatever works for you. So there's almost, you could say, a sort of hierarchy going from the bottom all the way up in terms of engagement for your videos. And so let's talk about some of the different options. voice over PowerPoint, or if you're using a Mac, of course, Slides or the Google equivalent as well will work for you. That is sort of the most basic thing that you can do. It's not very engaging, but it does provide content for your students, and they get to hear your voice, which is going to be important for them. Another thing that you might want to consider doing, a second format, would be screen recording. And so like in Apple, you would use QuickTime for that. Office 365 for Windows users has its own variation of that. If you have Camtasia, you can do that. So you can show them you doing something on the screen and talking over that. A lot of YouTube tutorials look like that. And so depending on what you're teaching, that might be a good way to do things. Another thing that I've done, like with my critical thinking videos in the past, is slides, and you just export the slides. You can do it from PowerPoint. You can do it from whatever other format you're using, and you just drop them into your video editor, and then you can use your video editor to do a picture-in-picture of you in the bottom or maybe at the top, going over that. The one thing you have to do if you're going to use that format is make sure your slide doesn't have information that's getting blocked out by your lovely face and the image of you leading the students through that. I myself prefer to use recorded videos like you're seeing right now, me talking into the camera or in front of the chalkboard. You can use all sorts of other things. We're going to get to that in a minute instead of a chalkboard. But that's probably the most engaging for students when they can actually see you, their instructor, not just your face and not just like a portion of your body, but a good bit of you moving around, talking in the way that you normally would. Students do, in fact, really respond to the human face and figure. The one thing I would avoid, and they were quite popular years back, so many of you remember those animated videos where you put in text and then in a kind of robot voice, a pig and a rabbit talk to each other. Not engaging at all. I wouldn't use those for students, but any of the other formats I think would be quite useful for you. Another format consideration that you're probably going to want to have in mind is where you're going to upload the video once you've actually produced it. And you've got a number of different choices as an educator. So one thing is you can use your own personal YouTube or Vimeo channel. That's not a bad thing to do, not least because YouTube will provide you with closed captioning, which can be useful for your students who are hearing impaired or have other reasons for wanting to see text, and it will provide them with transcripts. It's not 100% accurate. Accents sometimes trip it up, but it's decent, and it's gotten a lot better in recent years. Many institutions, if you're using Google Suite, will already have a YouTube channel right there created for you within your institution. So I have, for example, a Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design YouTube channel, which I use only for that. Milwaukee Area Technical College also does that. So you probably have that if your institution has Google Suite. Another similar thing would be Kaltura. And both of those have the advantage, again, of being able to provide closed caption. And then you might also consider directly uploading your video into whatever course management system you're using. That's like Blackboard or Canvas or Sakai or Moodle, because all of them can upload fairly short videos. And, depending on the bandwidth, maybe even longer videos. You want to check to see what that is. Maybe talk to your IT person, or, you can also find that in the course management system. The one disadvantage with that is that you're not going to get closed captioning. Now, in the middle of a crisis, people aren't going to be that concerned about ADA compliance, but it is nice for students to have that. So you might want to consider, your institutional YouTube or personal YouTube or Kaltura or something along those lines. Let's talk now about the actual production. And I'm not going to go through how to do the video editing software or anything like that. There's all sorts of tutorials out there for you. I will say this, there's a learning curve for any one of them. I use iMovie, but there's, all sorts of other variations. Any of them are fine for what you're going to be doing. Just expect it to take a little while. What I'm going to talk about now is more about the production on the shooting side, like what I'm doing right now talking to you. So the very first thing that I want to point out is you're doing video, which means that you can do multiple takes. Take the pressure off of yourself. You don't need to get it right the first time. I sometimes get in front of the chalkboard and shoot for 3 minutes of me starting out a video and not being happy with how I started it or losing my train of thought, and then I just, start again. One thing you might want to consider doing if you're shooting at all like that is don't stop the camera, just keep going and do this. Put a wave for yourself so you know that at that point in time you had some sort of glitch or mistake or brain fart or whatever you're going to call it, and that's where you want to pick up from. And that's perfectly fine. That's what editing is for. You can take pauses. If you need to take a 20-minute break, go ahead and do that. You can take the pressure off of yourself. So that's the very first thing that we want to think about. Second is a lot of people are worried, do I need to write out an entire script before I start shooting? And you can do that. I mean, right now, what I'm doing with this video, I've got some notes here and I'm going off of those notes. Most of my videos that I produce, I've got stuff on the chalkboard. I use it as a rough guide for my own thinking, but most of what I'm doing, whether I'm lecturing online or going face-to-face or even providing lectures, paid lectures here and there, is going off of notes at most, or sometimes just what's in my head. That's me. A lot of you can do that. Probably more of you than you think can, but some people might want to have a script, and it's perfectly fine to use a script. As a matter of fact, if that makes you feel more confident, do that, because that's going to produce higher quality video in terms of content for your students, and that's what everything here is about. Another thing that I think is really helpful as you're either scripting it or thinking out what you're going to say is anticipating where the pain points for your students are. Where are they going to get confused? What terminology is going to trip them up? What questions are they likely to have? You might actually reserve some time at the end of the video, and you could again, just take a pause and then come back to that for likely questions. So, when I'm shooting a video, for example, on Kant's categorical imperative, the first formulation, man, students are going to get that mixed up. And so when I do a video on it, I need to think about, okay, how are they going to go astray and how can I explain that to them? And you can do that in your own field. That you're the expert, you understand those things, and presumably you have some experience in seeing where students are going to need a little bit of extra help. So you can build that into your video. Few other things that I would say, you can use a blackboard if you want to. I'm kind of old school that way. Some people like to use a whiteboard or a flip chart, one of those paper things that you flip over. Any of those are perfectly fine. You don't have to have that, though. You could also provide them with a write-up of your video or slides. If there's some content that you want them to have, it doesn't all have to be in there in every single part of the video. It's a-okay to do it with what works for you and what you think your students need. The last thing that I'm going to say about the actual production part, and this is very important. Sometimes educators buy into this thing that went around. It's essentially a meme among educational experts that we call the 5-minute rule. The idea was that videos, in order to engage the somewhat attention deprived and technology oriented students of at that time the future, because this has been said for 20 years, videos have to be only 5 minutes long. That is complete nonsense. Students and other people will watch an hour-long video if the content is really good and engaging. Now, I'm not saying shoot an hour-long video. I would say the sweet spot is between 10 and 20 minutes. Shorter videos can be useful, but you can't convey as much information now, can you? Think about if I decided to make this only 5 minutes, how much you'd be missing out on, right? It's perfectly fine for you to shoot videos that are 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. All of those, they will work for your students. Students can always take a pause when they want to. The key is the content has to be interesting, engaging, worth watching. And again, you're the experts, so you can figure out how to make your content fit that bill. I know that I have videos that are an hour and a half long and people watch them from the beginning all the way to the end. Not everybody does, of course, and I wouldn't suggest using those for classes necessarily, but people will do that. So you can dispense with any worries about the 5-minute rule. All of these things are worth keeping in mind. I said that was the last thing, but I will say one other thing. In your videos, don't try to be somebody else. Your students already know you as their instructor that they've seen face-to-face for a while. Just be yourself, be conversational. It doesn't have to be perfect. You are the person that they are tuning in to help them with whatever it is that you're studying in that class. So just keep that in mind, and the students will watch it and be very grateful that you created that material for them. Once you've created your videos, they have to have a place to go, a home to live, and that is most likely going to be the course management system that you're using for your now online course. So it could be Blackboard, Sakai, Moodle, Desire to Learn, Canvas, Schoology, all of them, and there's many others as well. You only need to know one of them, and that's the one that you're putting things into. And each of them has a way to incorporate videos. So if you put your videos into YouTube or the institutional YouTube channel, there's a link and there's also an embed code, and you want to get familiar with how to find those. And you'll be able to put those into the course management system. And you don't have to get fancy with it. You don't have to, create, long sequences that are perfect or anything like that. You just have to have your students able to access them. So even just writing the name of the video and then the link, that is perfectly fine so long as students can access it. There are probably tutorials for any one of the systems that you're using that can help you if you want to embed it, so they can see the video playing within the system. You can also contact your campus IT departments. Even though campuses are closed, they are still providing, at least in most cases, some guidance and help, for people that are now trying to get fully online. The last thing that I do want to say about this, and I should have mentioned this a little bit earlier, this can be a good sign, you can always switch things up in a video. Make sure when you're uploading your videos, whether it's in YouTube or an institutional YouTube or directly into the course management system, make sure that you have an accurate title. You don't have to worry so much about having a nice thumbnail or anything like that, because you're not worried about search engine optimization or getting lots of views. You're worried about your students understanding what the video is about. So those are the things that have to do with you might say the implementation, the incorporation of videos into the actual class that you're working on. The last thing that I'll say, when you post new video content, maybe send out a message to your students saying, hey, there's some videos for you to check out, because students are going to need reminders from time to time. I think there's a lot of common concerns and worries that first-time video producers, now perhaps in many cases first-time online teachers, will have about this whole process. And so, at the end of this video, I want to take a little time to try to allay some fears and anxieties if possible, based on my experience and on what the research tells us about, lecture capture, video production, all those sorts of things. So the first question that you can ask yourself, and probably a lot of you envisioning shooting videos have already done this, and perhaps some of you have engaged in some negative self-talk about this, is the video I'm going to produce, or the videos that I'm going to produce, is it good enough? And the answer in almost every case is going to be yes. It is good enough. Because you've all heard that phrase from back in the early days of the internet, content is king. Content matters the most. Are you able to convey information effectively to your students? Good. Everything else is gravy. If it sounds great, that's great. You want it to sound at least good enough that students can make out what's being said. But if there's a little bit of background hiss, nobody's going to ding you on that. Does the lighting have to be perfect? Absolutely not. So long as they can actually see you or see the chalkboard or whatever else it is that you're using, so long as the slides, if you're doing PowerPoint stuff, look decent, they don't have to be fancy, it's good enough. So you're just doing the basic bare bones. Later on, if you really like doing this, you can get more advanced. But right now, what's important is producing content for your students so that they can wrap their heads around the things that you're studying in your class after the disruptions that we're experiencing and through a time of crisis. So good enough is good enough. Another key thing, I would say, I mentioned, being yourself. Your students already have a rapport with you. You don't need to think about, shooting videos that are going to somehow connect you to viewers that have never seen you. You're talking to your students. So not only should you, be yourself, but you can expect them to already relate to you. You can refer to things that you did before in class, and you can use videos to kind of build a sense of community. Students are not going to be upset with you for doing videos. They are going to be happy and grateful that you're actually taking the time to prepare materials for them that lets them see a human face and voice, somebody who's concerned about them, both their health and their education. So, smile. We are in the middle of a crisis, but that doesn't mean that, everything has to be doom and gloom, at least in videos. And, you might begin your videos. This is a suggestion from my wife, who's always got great advice about this. You might express some hopes that they're doing well, and you might close on something like that as well. Another concern I think that some people have is worries about being judged or evaluated on the basis of their videos. Nobody is going to be judging you or evaluating you, not students, not administrators. Again, we're in the middle of a crisis. The key is to make education possible and to do so, in an engaging manner, a well-informed manner. It doesn't have to be highly produced. If you say and ah like I do all the time, nobody is going to hold that against you. This is for classes. This is not stuff that you're putting out there on the internet for everybody, particularly trolls, to go after you on. The last thing that I'll say in this part is, one thing to watch out for is, as you get excited about the material that you're talking about, there is a human tendency to start talking faster and faster and faster. That also happens when we're nervous or anxious. So, try to pace your delivery a bit. You don't have to worry over much about what you're wearing. If you want to dress up for class, you certainly can, but there's no inherent necessity. So hopefully this has been helpful for you, has given you some ideas about how you would go on and produce videos. It's going to be a different sort of set of processes for everybody because you've got different software and hardware and different material that you're presenting, but the basics are the same. You find something that works for you, whether it's an iPhone, your computer's camera, another camera. You try to make sure that it's decent enough, picture and sound quality and lighting, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And you teach. You teach your material. You teach it to your students. You don't have to worry about trying to pack it all in 5 minutes. Dispense with that nonsense 5 minutes rule. It can be 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You can upload it in a lot of different ways. You can edit it in a lot of different ways. If it's not perfect, if it's not beautiful, that's okay. What matters is getting it done. And you've got lots of opportunities because of the way video processing works to do it, multiple takes if you want to. If you're not happy with the first take, do it again. You're going to get better and better at this as time goes on. There's a learning curve. So I encourage all of you to jump in. You can ask me questions in the comments and I'll be happy to address them. And, we'll see about maybe shooting some other videos that are a little bit more focused about particular issues, like why you would pick this format or that format. But for now, just start churning away and see whether you can get some things out there for your students, maybe by the end of the week.